What if the smallest things in your pantry held the biggest consequences for your health? Welcome back to the Senior Health Podcast, where East meets West to uncover the simple truths behind lasting strength, sharper memory, and graceful aging. I'm Dr. John Grant, and if you're over 60 and still tossing seeds into your smoothie or salad without thinking twice, this episode could be a wake-up call. Because not all seeds support your health. Some can quietly inflame your joints, disrupt your gut, and even cloud your mind, especially as your body becomes more sensitive with age. And others? They're tiny allies, delivering nutrients that ease digestion, balance hormones, and protect the brain. And today's guest knows exactly that, because he's over 100, still walking daily, and still treating patients with the power of food and tradition. No one is better equipped to guide us than a man who's lived through a century of health trends and stayed strong through them all. Dr. Hinohara, it's an honor to have you back.
Thank you, John. It's always a privilege to speak with you and with everyone listening. This conversation may surprise a lot of people because we've been told to trust seeds. They're small, they're natural, they're ancient. But not all seeds are safe. Not all are helpful to the aging body. As we grow older, digestion slows, inflammation becomes more common, and hormones shift. That changes how the body reacts to certain foods, even those that seem healthy on the surface. Some seeds can actually trigger more harm than healing, but others can become some of the most therapeutic tools we have. Today we'll explore both sides. 4 seeds I recommend limiting or avoiding entirely after 60, and 4 I believe can support your joints, your memory, your gut, and even your sleep. And I encourage everyone to stay with us until the very end, because the last seed we'll discuss might be one you've never heard of, yet it's one of the most powerful for brain clarity and emotional balance in later life. It's not expensive, it's not trendy, but it may be the missing piece many seniors have overlooked.
Wait, even something as small as a seed can impact memory and joints?
Yes, and often more than people realize, because seeds are not just food. They are chemical messengers. They carry oils, fibers, and plant compounds that can either soothe or stress the aging body. A seed can be cooling or inflammatory, gentle or sharp. And that difference becomes far more important after 60. Western nutrition has often lumped seeds together as superfoods. And while some deserve that praise, others don't. Especially not when the gut is more sensitive, the metabolism is slower, and every bite matters more. We've seen this clearly in Japan. The seeds we've used traditionally are very different from the ones now trending in the West. And those differences show up in the health of our elders.
That really hits home for me. I think about one of my patients, a retired school teacher in her 70s, who was eating flax and sunflower seeds every single day because she read they were good for everything. But she kept coming in with brain fog, bloating, and joint pain that just wouldn't budge. Once we adjusted the types of seeds she was eating, her energy came back within weeks. It made me realize how often even well-meaning habits can quietly backfire, especially after 60. So let's get into it. What's the first seed you believe seniors should approach with caution?
The first seed I encourage many seniors to be cautious with is sunflower seeds. On the surface, they seem harmless, packed with vitamin E, crunchy, satisfying. But what most people don't realize is that they're extremely high in omega-6 fatty acids, and in small amounts, that's fine. The problem is when they're consumed daily, in trail mixes, granolas, nut butters, or sprinkled generously on everything.
That's something I see often. Patients think they're making a heart-healthy choice, but they're unknowingly eating them multiple times a day.
A 2022 study out of Kyoto University found that older adults with high omega-6 intake, particularly from seed oils like sunflower, showed increased markers of systemic inflammation and a higher risk of metabolic dysfunction. And that's not unique to Japan. Researchers at the National Institutes of Health in the US also observed that diets with an imbalanced omega-6 to omega-3 ratio were linked to cognitive decline and joint inflammation in older populations. The concern isn't about eating a few seeds. It's about the cumulative effect over time, especially when the body becomes more sensitive to inflammatory triggers.
That's surprising, because sunflower seeds are marketed as anti-inflammatory. But in excess, that omega-6 imbalance could actually be fueling inflammation.
Exactly, especially when they're roasted in vegetable oils, which adds even more omega-6. The body needs both omega-3 and omega-6 to stay in balance, but the modern diet already tilts heavily toward omega-6, sometimes 20 to 1, and when that balance tips too far, it can worsen joint pain, accelerate cognitive decline, and even increase the risk of metabolic disorders in older adults. I've seen this happen with patients who thought they were snacking smart, but their labs told another story.
That imbalance seems so easy to overlook, especially when you're just grabbing a handful between meals.
Yes, and even more so when you're told it's healthy.
So it's not that sunflower seeds are inherently bad. It's about frequency, preparation, and what else is already in your diet.
Exactly right. In Japan, we rarely consumed sunflower seeds traditionally, and certainly not by the handful. When we did use seeds, it was in small, intentional amounts, often fermented or ground into pastes.
That's such an important nuance, especially for listeners who are doing their best, but may be unintentionally creating more inflammation. And this is only the beginning. Let's keep going. What's the second seed that may be silently draining vitality after 60?
The second seed I encourage caution with, and one that often surprises people, is cottonseed. It's not something people sprinkle on their salad, but it finds its way into the diet in more hidden, processed forms. Cottonseed oil is one of the most commonly used industrial seed oils in packaged foods, and it contains compounds that can quietly disrupt hormone balance and promote inflammation. For seniors, especially those already dealing with metabolic issues or thyroid imbalances, this kind of oil can have far-reaching effects.
That's a powerful point, because most people don't even realize they're consuming it. It's not showing up as a seed, it's showing up in crackers, baked goods, even so-called healthy dressings.
Exactly, and because cotton is not grown as a food crop, it's grown as a fiber crop. It's often heavily sprayed with pesticides. That residue doesn't always disappear in the oil extraction process, and unlike olive or avocado oil, which have antioxidant properties, cottonseed oil is highly processed, stripped of nutrients, and prone to oxidation. That means it can increase inflammation silently, not through taste, but through what it does inside the body.
And since it's in so many shelf-stable foods, people could be consuming it daily without even knowing.
They are, and the older the body gets, the more sensitive it becomes to these low-grade chronic inputs. Over time they add up, not with one meal, but with one habit, repeated quietly over years.
It really challenges the assumption that all seed oils are interchangeable. I've had patients switch to so-called vegetable oil blends thinking they were making a better choice, but their inflammation markers kept rising. And once we swapped it for a cold-pressed oil or cut it out entirely, the results were dramatic. Let's keep building on this. What's the third seed seniors should look at with a more critical eye?
The third seed I believe seniors should be especially cautious with is the raw kidney bean seed. Technically, it's a legume, but the dried seed form is where the danger lies, especially if it's undercooked or eaten raw. Kidney beans contain a compound called phytohemagglutinin, which in small amounts can cause severe digestive distress, nausea, vomiting, even hospitalization in some cases.
And I've heard just a few improperly cooked beans can trigger that response?
Yes, as few as 4 or 5 raw or undercooked kidney seeds can be enough to cause symptoms in sensitive individuals. And as we age, our digestion becomes slower and more reactive, which means even small mistakes can have bigger consequences.
So the risk isn't just theoretical. It's a real concern for people using beans in homemade stews or slow cookers?
Exactly. Many people soak kidney beans, but don't realize that they must be boiled for at least 10 minutes at high heat to neutralize the toxin. Slow cooking at low temperatures isn't enough, and that's where problems begin.
I once treated a patient in her 70s who had made a vegetarian chili in a slow cooker. She soaked the beans but never brought them to a boil. The result was 2 days of intense nausea and fatigue, which she thought was the flu. It turned out to be a classic case of phytohemagglutinin poisoning, which is the 4th seed that seniors should think twice before using.
The 4th seed I believe deserves real caution, especially among seniors, is the apple seed. While most people don't go out of their way to eat them, many do chew or swallow them accidentally, especially in whole fruit smoothies or when juicing. Apple seeds contain amygdalin, which can convert into cyanide in the body when broken down. And though small amounts are rarely dangerous, repeated exposure over time can add unnecessary stress to the system.
That's something I think a lot of people have no idea about, especially those who blend whole apples into juices or smoothies without removing the core.
Exactly. The occasional seed isn't likely to cause harm, but when it becomes a daily habit, especially in a weakened or slower metabolizing system, it's not wise to ignore.
So it's less about panic and more about awareness and consistency.
Yes, for someone in their 20s, the body may compensate easily, but after 60, detoxification pathways are slower, and even small toxic loads can accumulate more noticeably.
I've seen patients with no obvious dietary red flags who still felt unwell. And when we looked closer, things like whole fruit blending with seeds were part of the picture. It really drives home that small choices, repeated over time, shape how we age. So now that we've walked through 4 seeds that can quietly stress the system, let's pivot. Because the right seeds in the right form can be a game changer after 60.
Let's begin with one of the most supportive seeds for seniors, black sesame. Unlike white sesame, which is often processed or consumed raw, black sesame is traditionally toasted and ground in Japan, making it easier to digest and more nutritionally available. It's rich in calcium, iron, and natural antioxidants that help support both the brain and the bones as we age.
That's fascinating, and I imagine the way it's prepared is just as important as the seed itself.
Absolutely. When lightly roasted and ground into a paste or powder, it becomes far gentler on the digestive system while delivering steady, usable nutrition.
So the same seed family can have opposite effects depending on the type and preparation.
Exactly. Black sesame has been part of traditional longevity diets in Japan for centuries, not just for taste, but for stability and strength. It's food as quiet medicine.
It reminds me of a patient who switched from using white sesame oil to adding a little ground black sesame over her morning rice, and she told me her energy felt more balanced within days. These aren't dramatic, overnight changes, but they're consistent and deeply rooted in tradition. And that's what makes them so powerful. So, what's the second seed that truly earns its place in a senior's kitchen?
The second seed I often recommend to seniors is hemp seed. It's one of the most digestible sources of plant-based protein and contains a near-perfect balance of omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acids. For aging bodies, the balance can help reduce inflammation and support clearer thinking, steadier energy, and even hormonal health.
That's a seed that's become more popular recently, but not everyone knows how to use it properly.
That's true. Hemp seeds are best eaten raw and shelled, what we call hemp hearts, and they can be added to warm grains, soups, or even blended into smoothies without causing digestive strain.
So they're both gentle and versatile, but not something you'd want to overheat or process too much.
Exactly. High heat can damage the delicate fats inside the seed, so keeping them raw or lightly warmed is ideal. And just a tablespoon or two is plenty for most people.
I've seen patients experience noticeable improvements in their joint stiffness and skin health after adding hemp seeds consistently. It's not a quick fix, but it builds quietly over time. And because it doesn't have the same digestive risks as chia or flax, it's a much safer entry point for seniors exploring plant-based nutrients. So now I'm curious, what's the third seed that offers real support for the aging brain and body?
Third seed I hold in high regard, especially for older adults, is perilla, known in Japan as egoma. It's not well known in the West, but it's been part of our traditional diets for generations, particularly in rural areas where longevity is more common. Perilla seeds are incredibly rich in alpha-linolenic acid, a plant-based omega-3 that supports heart health, reduces inflammation, and nourishes the brain. What sets them apart is their gentleness. They're less likely to cause digestive upset compared to heavier seeds, and they also contain rosmarinic acid, a compound shown in some studies to support memory and reduce seasonal allergies. We often use them ground or press them into a cold oil that's drizzled over steamed vegetables or added to warm grains. It's a seed that carries both tradition and science, and the body seems to know how to use it well.
That's remarkable. I've never heard a patient mention perilla, but it sounds like it offers exactly the kind of support many of them are missing. And the fact that it's gentler on the system makes it especially useful for those navigating sensitive digestion or inflammation.
Yes, and it also has a calming effect on the nervous system, which is so important after 60. In Japan, we often say food should not just feed the body, it should calm the heart. That's the spirit behind perilla. One small study published in the Japanese Journal of Nutrition and Dietetics showed that older adults who consume perilla oil daily experienced fewer sleep disturbances and more emotional balance after just 6 weeks. This is not magic. It's nourishment at a cellular level. And what I love is how little you need. A teaspoon of the oil, a pinch of the seeds. It doesn't take much to begin shifting the terrain inside.
It sounds like the kind of food that doesn't overwhelm the system. It supports it.
Exactly, and when food feels like support instead of stress, that's when real healing begins.
It reminds me of a patient who had tried everything for her evening anxiety, teas, supplements, even medication. But once we started working more with omega-3s from food, including flax, walnuts, and now I think we'll try perilla, her evenings became more grounded. Sometimes the answer isn't more treatment, it's better nourishment. So we've covered 3. What's the final seed you believe seniors should welcome into their routine?
The final seed I recommend, and perhaps the most overlooked, is lotus seed. In Japan we call it renkon no mi, and it has been used in traditional medicine for centuries. Unlike oily seeds, lotus seeds are starchy, soft and rich in a unique combination of amino acids and calming plant compounds. They're often boiled or simmered into soups, which makes them easy to digest and deeply grounding for older adults. What's fascinating is their impact on sleep and emotional balance. One compound in lotus seed, nephrine, has been studied for its natural sedative effects and its ability to regulate neurotransmitters related to stress. In our culture, lotus is considered a symbol of peace and resilience, and the seed carries some of that same quiet strength. It doesn't spike blood sugar, it doesn't inflame, it simply nourishes gently, especially when the nervous system feels frayed.
That's beautiful, and it's a completely different category of seed than most people think about. In the West, we associate seeds with crunch, oil, and fiber, not softness, calm, and warmth.
Exactly, but after 60, the body often responds better to warm, slow, and soft. Lotus seed is all of that, and it still delivers steady fuel and protein without burdening digestion.
So this is more of a food seed than an oil seed, and that matters in how the body receives it?
Yes, and that difference becomes more important as we age. Most people think of strength as intensity, but for seniors, strength often comes from softness, rhythm, and digestion that feels effortless.
It reminds me of a patient who struggled with restless sleep and emotional ups and downs. She had tried heavy supplements, sleep aids, even high-protein diets. But when we shifted her toward warm, nourishing meals with ingredients like mung beans, barley, and lotus seed, her sleep stabilized and her mood followed. It wasn't a loud fix. It was a quiet one. And maybe that's the lesson in these seeds. Sometimes healing isn't loud or flashy. It's soft, steady, and earned with intention. Now that we've covered the full list, I'd love to close by asking you this. For someone over 60, feeling confused about food and frustrated with their body, where should they begin?
Begin with curiosity, not fear. The body after 60 is not broken. It's just speaking more clearly. And when you listen with respect, even the smallest seed can become medicine.
That's such a grounding perspective, and I think it gives a lot of hope to our listeners. Because so many people over 60 feel like their options are shrinking, when really, the wisdom of tradition can open new doors. You've given us a new lens today, Doctor, one that combines science with something deeper, a respect for how food feels. Before we go, if you had to leave us with one sentence, one truth to carry into the next meal, what would it be?
Choose the foods that speak gently, and your body will speak gently in return. That is the secret to aging with grace.
That's powerful, and a reminder that healing isn't always about doing more, but about doing what's right for you. If you found value in today's conversation, you might be interested in our series where we discuss 4 foods you should eat and 4 foods you should avoid. You can find the videos in the playlist over here.